Previously in the complete creation.
You got a ton of letters. Surely there's information contained in there. No, actually, there isn't. Not until information is imposed upon the medium, which in this case is letters made of tasty pasta. Hello once again, thank you for joining me in this second last lecture. In the last lecture, we looked at the information needed for life encoded in our DNA. Organisms are built from the plans or information conveyed by the DNA. So of course, if you change the plans, you change how the organism is built. We saw how that information, the plans, are in fact deteriorating over time. If the plans become more and more corrupt, then you introduce genetic disease and disorder into the organism. The organism becomes sicker over time. A lot of people, obviously alarmed by this rapid deterioration of our human DNA, asked how much time we have before we die from this loss of information. Well, let me look at the time here. Yeah, we got at least a couple weeks left. I'm kidding, just kidding. I don't know how much time we have left. The point being, though, is that our genetic information is deteriorating over time and fast. It is not causing evolution, but rather extinction. Some were also asking where I got my numbers of 100 mutations per generation. So let me respond to that very quickly. That was actually a conservative number that I used for the sake of maths and argumentation. The real number appears to be higher, probably around 120 per generation. And it was multiple researchers who brought up similar numbers, including Kondrashov. Sanford referenced multiple sources in his book. The point being, though, that life forms are built upon these plans contained within the genetic code, your DNA. If the plans change, then obviously how the organism is built also changes. It then follows that these changes are a requirement for evolution. After all, that's how you would change organisms into other organisms over time. To bring this point home, let us examine a story we're all familiar with. The princess finds a frog, kisses the frog, and the frog turns into Prince. Now, this is considered a fairy tale. This is not to be condescending, but it is intended to be blunt. This is the theory of evolution in a nutshell. You have amphibians turning into university professors, and the magic is replaced with hundreds of millions of years of genetic changes. It's still magic because those alleged genetic changes have never been observed and are still not being observed in any scale today. In fact, the genetic changes that are being observed are the exact opposite direction to that required by the evolution myth. But the point being, that is a lot of change. My good friend John Mackay from Australia makes a very significant point he brings up in his debates with evolutionists. He simply asks the very important question: if creation were true, what would the evidence be? Now, seeing as how creation is founded in the scriptures, let's go there to see if we can find any clues. As John points out, we actually find a profound clue. In the first chapter of Genesis, the creation account, 10 times it says that organisms reproduce after their kind. In other words, palm trees will reproduce palm trees, cows will give birth to cows, bats will give rise to bats, dogs will give birth to dogs, always. Now, there can be tremendous variation within the kind, but using our previous example, dogs will only give rise to dogs. You can see tremendous variation within the kind, especially the plant kind. This is not macroevolution. This is variation within the kind. Even humans can exhibit incredible variation. Take a look at these skull reconstructions of different people. All of them are completely modern humans. African, Asian, Native American, Nordic, European, and finally, the Australian Aboriginal male. Look at the difference in size between the skulls. Look at that heavy brow ridge and the large eye sockets of the Aborigine. What will probably surprise you the most about these variations is that the genetic diversity has very little influence on the shape or even the size of the skulls. The vast majority of the extreme variations observed is caused by diet and environment. That's it. The Aborigine have a diet which is primarily very hard to chew. Your bones change shape throughout your lifetime in response to stresses. This is why you can wear dental braces and literally change the shape of your jawbone and tooth sockets. Here in North America, we have a very soft, overcooked diet, and so our jawbones simply do not grow as large and robust as the Aborigines. And ironically, this leads to North American problems like impacted wisdom teeth. The powerful muscles from your jaws go up and anchor at various places on your skull. So the stresses from those muscles influence the shape of your skull as well. This has absolutely nothing to do with evolution, and these are all 100% completely human. The reason I bring this up is because even well-intentioned scientists might find fossil examples of these skulls and try to arrange them in evolutionary sequence when in fact there is no sequence. They are all completely modern humans and can even interbreed. I'm not yet including skull examples from pygmy humans or humans with disorders like microcephaly. Such people are completely human, but take the variations in skull shape and size to extremes. So with all that in mind, let's look at what we would expect to find in the fossil record if evolution were true, and contrast it with what we expect to find if creation were true. Evolution doesn't just have a frog turning into prince. That's only 2 organisms on a chain involving millions of different organisms, each one only one small step in difference, one to the other. Also, don't forget the millions of organisms that had to have evolved in the chain from a single-celled amoeba-like organism just to get to the frog. So, if evolution were true, we should see change in organisms over vast periods of time from the bottom to the top of the fossil record. If creation were true, we should expect to see organisms faithfully reproducing after their kind from the beginning of time. So in other words, no major changes. So when we look in the fossil record, what exactly do we see anyway? I have here a fossil cast of a fish we find here in Canada. We call it the gar pike. Now, what I am about to do for the next little while is give you the alleged evolutionary ages of the fossils I will present to you. I need to remind you that I do not believe these ages, as I think probably every fossil I'm about to show you would be around 4,500 years old, from the time of Noah's Great Flood. I bring up these evolutionary ages so we can judge the evolution myth on its own turf, playing by its own rules. I got this cast from Joe Taylor at the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crosbyton, Texas. But the original fossil comes from the Messel Formation in Germany, supposedly 48 million evolutionary years old. Now, how do we know this is a fossil garfish? Because it's still around today, unchanged. So, going by the evidence given by the evolutionists themselves, 48 million years of evolution has caused the garfish to evolve into the garfish. We call these living fossils because the fossil organism is still alive today. Vance and Coralie Nelson donated several beautiful fossils from their museum to mine a few years ago. This was one of them. This fossil comes from Lebanon and is given an age of 98 million evolutionary years. Can you identify the creature? That's right, a shrimp. How do we know it's a shrimp? Because you can go down to the all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet and see that they look exactly the same today as they do in the fossil record. 98 million years of evolution has caused the shrimp to evolve into spicy Kung Pao shrimp. Tasty, spicy Kung Pao shrimp. This fossil comes from Peru. Alleged to be 150 million years old. Can you identify it? Most of you can. How do you know what it is? Because it looks exactly like modern oysters. 150 million years of evolution has caused the oyster to evolve into the oyster. Nothing has changed. We had previously talked about the coelacanth, nicknamed the dinosaur fish because it was found all throughout the fossil record, allegedly up until the time of the dinosaurs, at which point it disappears from the younger layers and was presumed extinct until they were discovered alive in 1938. Now, the oldest fossils are alleged to be 410 million years old. How did we know the living fish was a coelacanth? Because it looks just like the fossil one. 410 million years of evolution has turned the coelacanth into a coelacanth. Nothing has changed. Let's switch from the dinosaur fish to the dinosaur tree known as Araucaria. And just like the coelacanth, this tree was known only from the fossil record. Like the coelacanth, it is last found in the dinosaur-bearing rock layers and not in any younger layers. It was thought to be extinct until 1994 when a grove of them were found alive in Wollemi National Park in New South Wales, Australia. It was subsequently named the Wollemi Pine. The Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney teamed up with Mount Annan to clone the trees, and they sold potted Wollemi pines so you too could own a dinosaur tree. Tino Groppi from Genesis Evidence Ministries obtained one for his traveling museum, and he shares it with all of us around the world. Thanks, Tino. I have here a fossil pine cone from an Araucaria. It's been cut in half so you can see the internal structure and even the preserved seeds. How do we know it's the Wollemi pine? Because it looks just like the cones on the Wollemi pine. Nothing has changed. Speaking of dinosaur trees, next time you're in Alberta, Canada, make sure you stop in at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. Tucked away in a spot that's really easy to miss in that absolutely massive museum is a greenhouse called the Cretaceous Gardens. The entire greenhouse is nothing but plants that are found in the fossil form in the dinosaur beds in Alberta. It is a fantastic exhibit of nothing but living fossils that scream over and over again, 65 to 70 million years of evolution has caused absolutely no change whatsoever. After leaving the Cretaceous gardens, you'll come across this exhibit of a fossil cockroach. How do we know it's a fossil cockroach? 'Cause it looks just like one. They even tell you, according to their numbers, 350 million years of evolution has caused the cockroach to evolve into the cockroach. After all of these fantastic examples of no change in organisms, they have this plaque, which is the ultimate example in irony. They turn around and say, species come and go. The only constant in life on Earth is change. Really? Where's the change? Where is it? I previously showed you examples of the biodiversity found in the fossil beds of Joggins, Nova Scotia. Using the age alleged by the evolutionists, then, according to them, 300 million years of evolution has caused ferns to evolve into ferns, damselflies to evolve into damselflies, and scorpions to evolve into scorpions. There are numerous fossil organisms you can find there that are still around today, unchanged in 300 million evolutionary years. I have here yet another fossil from the Nelsons and Creation Truth Ministries. It's a fossil of a type of starfish called the brittle star. And look at the stunning condition of this fossil. As a defense mechanism, if the brittle star feels threatened, it can lose all its arms. Better for an attacker to get away with an arm that can be grown back than to have your entire body eaten. So these arms can be ditched in the twinkling of an eye. Yet here they are, plenty of them found fossilized with their arms intact. This indicates just how quickly they were buried. They were buried alive. But this fossil is alleged to be 200 million years old. How do we know it's a brittle star? Because it looks just like the brittle stars of today. 200 million years of evolution has caused the brittle star to evolve into the brittle star. Nothing has changed. I previously showed you these fossil fish from the Green River Formation in Wyoming on display at the Big Valley Creation Science Museum in Alberta. Do make sure you stop in for a visit. With even soft tissues preserved in stunning detail, these fish, alleged to be 48 million years old, have shown change over time. They have evolved into a flatfish. But seriously, there's no change in them at all because this fish is still around today, and you're already familiar with it. It's known today as the herring. How do we know it's a herring? Because it looks like one. 45 million years of evolution has caused the herring to evolve into a herring. Actually, it might be 48 million years, but it's so hard to keep track. Besides which, what's 3 million years among friends? But it's not just fish found in the Green River Formation. We find plants as well. Here's another original fossil on display at the Big Valley Creation Science Museum. You recognize it? It's a palm tree frond. How do you know? 'Cause it looks just like one. We also find other plants like this one. Some of you may recognize it right off the bat. It's a leaf from a sycamore tree. We know this because it hasn't changed from the fossil form one iota. As a matter of fact, all of the following Green River Formation fossils show that, according to the evolutionist data, 48 million years of evolution has caused the alligator gar to evolve into the alligator gar, ray fish into ray fish, alligators into alligators, snakes into snakes, damselflies into damselflies, birds into birds, bats into bats, and they are all recognizable because they are still around today, unchanged in 48 million years. And lest this point be missed, this dramatic, yet completely fictitious, evolutionary change presented in textbooks is alleged to have taken place over a measly 4 million years. That's a lot of change in a short amount of time. I have here another fossil. I want to see if you can identify it. This one might be tricky. It's alleged to be Eocene in age, or about 56 million years old, give or take a week. Do you think you know what it is? It's a fossil crab. But how do you know? Because they're still around today. The fossil form is identical to modern crabs. 56 million years of evolution has caused fossil crabs to evolve into modern crabs. But let's up the ante a little bit. There's a couple of places that hold fossils alleged to be some of the oldest on planet Earth, according to evolutionism, called the Ediacaran. One fossil bed is in Australia, and there's a second one here in Canada at Mistaken Point in Newfoundland. Mistaken Point is peppered with these strange fossils, hundreds of them. Now a World Heritage Site, the fossil bed is claimed by evolutionists to be 565 million years old. Positively dated, because there was a thin layer of volcanic ash on top of the fossil layer. This meant direct contact of volcanics, which could be radiometrically dated. We already had that lengthy discussion, but I'm going to go with their data for the sake of argument. Vance Nelson from Creation Truth Ministries in Alberta has actually gotten post-secondary education on marine biology. He clearly knows way more about this than I do. And it was he who pointed out that these critters are still around today. Unchanged, we call them sea pens. Sea pens are like corals. It's a colonial organism. So there's actually hundreds of little organisms living in a colony to make this shape of the branches, the quill of the pen, and what they called the hold fast, which is the anchor for the whole colony. Now, the reason the sea pen interpretation was initially rejected from Mistaken Point was because, according to the evolutionary timeline, sea pens had not yet evolved 565 million years ago. Yet, here they are, preserved in fossil form, complete with the holdfast. Ridiculously small variations in the fossil form were presented as evidence that these fossils were not sea pens. But the sea pen is a colonial organism. The variations you can get are extreme. Over and over again, throughout the history of evolutionary paleontology, we see suppression or outright rejection of fossil identifications as their obviously modern extant counterpart, because the paleontologists' evolutionary faith blinds them. According to evolutionary dogma, this organism had not yet appeared at the time the rock was formed. Therefore, this fossil cannot be the modern form we see today, when it is obvious that the fossil most certainly is the same modern organism. We will see this strange misinterpretation of fossils come up over and over again in the next and final lecture dealing with the alleged line of human descent. For the moment, 565 million evolutionary years has caused the sea pen to evolve into the sea pen, a very complex colonial organism. But let's up the ante just a little bit more. I have a fossil here of another complex colonial organism. Cyanobacteria, which glue together sand from the ocean bed into these layered structures. This fossil comes from Strelly Pool in Australia and is claimed by the evolutionary community to be 3.4 billion years old. That's billion with a capital B. It's called a stromatolite. But how do we know what it is? Because they're still around today, being made all over the world. This is a modern one from Marion Bay, Australia. 3.4 billion years of evolution has caused cyanobacteria to evolve into cyanobacteria. Nothing has changed. This lack of change in organisms over time is called stasis. And what we see in the fossil record is two things: stasis and extinction. Neither of these help evolution. Stasis is a record of organisms faithfully reproducing after their kind, and extinction is a loss of genetic information and diversity. This is what we see in the fossil record, not change over time. This is completely in line with the Genesis account of creation and completely refutes evolutionism, even when you play by their rules. Evolutionism, Darwinism, is as dead as the fossils I have shown you here today. I'm out of time. I hope you'll join me for the next lecture, where we reveal some significant breaking research that has not yet been published as we examine the alleged ascent of man.
Coming up in the next Complete Creation.
But this Neanderthal skull has a strange, clean hole in the side. There's actually a path of holes through the skull to a larger fractured hole. The path, entry, and exit wounds sure match those made by a bullet.
You can catch the entire series in a variety of ways. You can watch the show online at www.completecreation.org or www.genesisweek.com. You can also purchase the Complete Creation series in full high definition on Blu-ray or video on demand at completecreation.org. Or support the Miracle Channel with a monthly tax-deductible donation and access the entire Complete Creation series in high definition through Corco, Miracle Channel's video on demand service. We need your support to keep this program on the air, so please pray for us. And if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K2K2P4. Or you can make a donation via PayPal online at ianjuby.org/donations. And thank you for your support.